So thank you everybody for joining our session, which is titled Best Practices for Learning Design, Communities of Practice. And this is presented by the Colorado Community College System Learning Design team. And I am going to keep our bios really short so that we can spend most of the time here talking together about communities of practice. So again, I'm Jessica George. I'm a learning designer with the CCCS Learning Design team. We also have Amanda Hardman, also a learning designer, and Grace Whiteaker and Kathy Sindt, who are both senior learning designers with our learning design team. And I will hand it off to the next speaker.
All right, well, hi everyone. As Jessica said, I'm Grace Whiteaker. So I kind of want to give a brief overview of our plan for today. We're going to spend our time looking at a series of questions that will help kind of guide our conversation. Through these questions, we've planned to express the value of collaboration around diverse approaches to online learning design, and hopefully give everyone a chance to contribute their best practices, what they've seen, what they've observed for structuring, maybe composition, interaction, and tools for setting up a learning design community of practice. As a side note, both Kathy Sindt and I are actually at OLC this week. And one of the sub-themes that we're seeing in every single presentation related to instructional design, learning design, is sort of this meta conversation that's not necessarily being recognized, but on the need to provide and create some sort of informal to formal community of practice for idea exchange, support cross-pollination of ideas, as everyone is facing much of the same challenge that we are: an explosive growth in the online learning arena due to the COVID pandemic, and it has now become kind of the genie out of the bottle aha moment that many colleges are looking at as a way to thrive, along with the needs not necessarily being accompanied with the right resources. So how do we build out community where we can actually extend our reach and kind of build our knowledge with contributions from folks either within systems, out of system, and kind of do the best that we can do with the resources that we have on hand in this kind of constantly changing landscape. So Amanda, if you want to go to the next slide, thank you. Let me get myself oriented here. So a little bit of context before we jump into our questions. Many of you are probably from the Colorado Community College system or have heard that this system is going and transitioning to a consortial model when it comes to online delivery of courses and support of online courses. The short background on that is that we're looking at a way to provide consistency and improve the overall student experience. And the way we're approaching that right now is several items. We're moving to a single instance of D2L for all colleges and incorporating a central support service model, which includes centralized services that are available to any and all colleges that are within our system, 13 colleges to be exact. And we're also within that single D2L instance providing a common framework or common navigation and course homepage for all modalities of courses, and then specifically related to our online course delivery, which is now being sort of branded as Colorado Online at, and then the college's name that's teaching the course will follow it in the name title of the course or section of the course. We're providing as a service and a support and an equity space ready to teach course shells that are collaboratively designed with the discipline faculty from around the state and Colorado Online Learning Design team members that are going to be ready to go out of the box if needed, that will meet all of the Colorado Online at course quality standards. The shells can be used as is. We have a lot of times people that are hired really in a day before a course needs to be taught and they need to be able to jump in and go. They can be heavily customized, lightly customized, or faculty can actually choose to build their course, take their current course thoughts and put them into the framework and start from there. Regardless, the courses should align to course outcomes and strive to meet the quality standards that include elements of accessibility, universal design for learning, DEI elements, and are based on this concept of student-centered learning. So with design and development taking place both centrally in this service aspect, as well as within each college, as faculty customize their courses or build from the ground up, and really across all modalities, but the concept of being able to talk to one another and collaborate and generate a space where all these different approaches can sort of percolate, and ideas and different directions might come out, or solutions to challenges that might not be solved as easily without the more of the collective input. We're looking to harness the power of collaboration within our community, and also looking at ways to address kind of longstanding communication challenges that can occur when we're working within particular departments, particular colleges, and trying to find a way to connect as all of these multiple modalities and deliveries are exploding. So I know that we are in the process of looking at this concept of forming a collaborative community, community of practice within CCCS. And what we want to do is spend this time learning from all of our collective experiences in this discussion space that will carry us through the rest of this session. Now I'll pass it on to my colleague Amanda for the next slide.
All right, and I'll be taking this one. So, no, you're fine. So the first question we wanted to start with was actually this really basic question of how do learning designers best learn and collaborate? So as learning designers or instructional designers, we're kind of thought of as the experts in learning. We think about specific learners' needs, specific audiences, these sorts of things. But we as a group have started to think about how do we as learning designers best learn, what are our specific learner needs, and how can collaborative spaces be a site of learning for us. We know that these are good spaces in classrooms, but how can sites of collaboration be, how should they best operate for learning designers to learn? So we have created a kind of interactive Padlet that we would encourage you to add your ideas to, and I've added this to chat. If you've not used Padlet before, you should be able to just kind of log on and add your response under that key question 1 column, or you could also share your ideas in chat if anything springs to mind. So I'm going to give us maybe just 30 seconds to kind of get started here. And we're hoping to hear from you all to kind of crowdsource some ideas here. So for those of you just joining us, we're taking a look at this Padlet that I've dropped into chat, or you can also just contribute your ideas to chat, thinking about the question of how do learning designers best learn and collaborate? Awesome. So we have some answers coming in, seeing examples and being able to maybe experiment with those examples, maybe remixing ideas and models. Another person has added one-on-one conversation with peers about the problems that they're tackling. That is one that I hadn't thought of, that kind of smaller kind of conversation rather than maybe a group conversation. That's a great one. Having the opportunities to collaborate with peers during a scheduled and specific time, not just share whatever you want or whenever you want. I think that maybe speaks to desire for some structure in learning design. That way, then we are specific about our needs and have the chance to visit about ideas. So that's a great addition there. It looks like we have one more coming through. Through experience, trial and error, working collaboratively in small groups to accomplish a common goal. It sounds like that sounds a lot like our actual like work environment. So maybe the work environment as a space for learning. And I think that we all probably see that. Getting feedback, exposure, and innovation time. So maybe like scheduling out specific time in your calendar for learning and researching, and we all can get super busy with these things. So having more structure is one thing that's coming through in some of these answers. Great. Well, I'm going to pass it on to the next slide, and we'll be growing some of these ideas soon.
Yeah, so these ideas about how we best learn actually influence the work of Etienne Wenger-Trainer, the leading theorist in the century who explores the model of a community of practice. Wenger-Trainer works with the assumption that learning is social and it occurs every day, whether in formal or informal kinds of environments. So it's kind of constructivist in nature. For a community of practice, as conceptualized by Wenger-Trainer, the three elements are the domain, the community, and the practice. The domain is the subject or the shared interest. The community is the sense of relationship that's created through interaction. And the practice is what Wenger calls a repertoire of resources that are developed over time. So to dig deeper into the facets of a community of practice, Wenger discusses the roles of competence, experience, and engagement. As a social learning model, the community of practice brings together people who share certain understandings of the needs of the domain and who can contribute to or exchange ideas effectively in that space, generating what Wenger calls a regime of competence. Participants in the community of practice bring a variety of actual experiences with the domain of practice. And so there's always a negotiation between experience and the boundaries that the community expects regarding competence. The endeavor of learning itself is actually very much tied up with identity. As Wenger puts it, learning is an act of becoming someone who lives into the aspects of competence that the community of practice represents. But experiences that people have within the community can also concretely shape that shared understanding of competence. So learning actually involves this becoming in the space of the community, but it also involves a constant realignment between personal experience and the community of practice's sense of competence. So it's a very dynamic space in which practice, or the things that are produced, constantly reflects participants' own actual lived engagement, that active process of realigning what I've learned through experience versus what the community kind of establishes as the competence. So Wenger stresses that time is an essential element in a community of practice. Experiences and interactions unfold and take shape over time. Wenger also emphasizes the need to offer a variety of activities that make space for relationship building, for interaction, for active experimentation, for problem solving, for resource sharing. Interestingly, all the things that we see on the Padlet related to that question of how do I learn and collaborate well in my domain. So the need for time is also implied within the 5 value indicators that you see on the screen here. And these are value indicators that Wenger himself proposed. There can be 1, an immediate value to a community of practice, as those interacting in that space get a sense of belonging and support. There is 2, a potential value when we build up a network and a set of resources in that space. There's 3, an applied value of actually being able to use an idea or a solution within an object that we produce, but we can actually solve a learning design problem that we experience, right? Now, the Department of Education's research, they say that there's not a lot of published research related to the 4th and 5th categories of realized and reframing values. So the Department of Education did a study with educator-based communities of practice, and they found through that study that 4th category, a realized value, and how educators involved in a community of practice came to take and establish a sense of personal responsibility for the results, the successes that their learners experienced, and also in how they saw connections between their practices and emerging district policies. And then the DOE's research also provided examples of the 5th category of reframing value and how educators noted that they changed perspectives over time, not only on their practices, what they actually do in their domains, but broader issues in education and how they perceive themselves as professionals with responsibility to their communities. So with that broader value in mind, I do want to return to our goals that we have for creating a learning design community of practice in our system. Wenger wrote that, quote, each community is engaged in the production of its own practice in relation to the whole system, of course, but also through its own local negotiation of meaning, end quote. In our system, especially as we move to this consortial model for online course design and delivery, we are in a unique position to produce our own practice and redefine the roles of learning designers. We have also recognized how communication barriers can impede shared meaning making and can impede collaboration. And we see a key role for a learning design community of practice related to opening up communication pathways and identifying an efficient way to crowdsource ideas and solutions related to the design and implementation challenges that we are going to face through and beyond this transition to Colorado Online Act. So with all that in mind, we move to our second key question, which is, so based on what you hear about Wenger's conception of a community of practice and based on your own experiences with community of practices, what do you think is the scope of an effective learning design community of practice, both in terms of purpose and in terms of target audience or stakeholders? That is, what's the most viable reason to create a learning design community of practice? Who should be a part of it? Who benefits? And what role should they take in establishing and managing a community of practice? And Jess has dropped the link to the Padlet back into our chat, and she has added a second column for key question number 2, which is the question you see on the screen here. So again, if you have any trouble with the Padlet, you can select that little plus icon under the question to add a comment. And if you have any trouble or can't access the Padlet or don't want to, you can also drop it in chat. Love to hear your ideas about what do you think is the purpose of a learning design community practice? Who should be involved? Who benefits? And it looks like there's some comments in progress, so I'm just going to give that a few seconds to complete the thoughts. Yeah, so bringing together, soliciting those diverse viewpoints, which, speaks to some of the things Grace had said in a prior section about all the different approaches to learning design in our system. and that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, right? There's a lot of people with established competence in our system, in our domains in which we practice, and we want those opportunities to collaborate and build on those ideas. And building on ideas kind of speaks back to what Wenger Trainer had said about that kind of constant realignment of like, well, what are the best practices in learning design? What are those standards for competence as we try different strategies in our own experience spaces? We can allow others within other practitioners within our domain to benefit. Another comment from the first point on the Padlet is those like structured opportunities for knowledge sharing. And Etienne Wenger Trainer had said that, right, it's not like communities of practice always have to be formal. They can be formal, they can be informal, they can be more structured, less structured. And as we move into the next section, Kathy will share a little bit about kind of those structure opportunities within a few of the community practices that we've actually found out there. An idea in the Padlet that students could productively be involved in a community of practice. And that's a really good point. And it's something that we often struggle with, well, not only in this team, but other teams that I've been a part of. I think it's something that we see in higher education generally, like how do we bring that student voice in? So does that mean the students are a potential part of membership of that kind of competence-based community of practice, or is that like a topic that people within a community of practice would discuss? Right, and because another comment says that students are the beneficiaries, right? Absolutely. But professionally, we're all beneficiaries of a community of practice, but right, the practice itself, our domain, is benefiting learners as stakeholders. And that opportunity to be transformative, that's a great point as well. And again, that's that like learning, that process of becoming, of growing into that identity that we claim within that community of practice. If we're not given that opportunity to be shaped by the interactions, the relationships, resources that we build in that practice, then maybe we haven't structured it well enough. And questions about structure will be coming up later as well. Okay. So lots of great ideas here, crowdsourcing, testing, researching. Continue to drop in ideas related to key questions number 1 or 2 as you have them in the Padlet. And just to help keep us on track, I'm going to pass us on to Kathy so that she can discuss a bit of different models of community practices to consider.
Okay, one of the things, as Jessica said, I'm Kathy Sindt. I'm a senior ID learning designer at CCC Online. One of the things that we did getting ready for this presentation was review several models that are out there. And I'm just going to quickly talk through some of them that we found. And there are links to all of those in our presentation, which I assume will be shared with everybody. So the first model, the UDLHE, is Professional Development and Networking Model. It's a network to collaborate, mentor each other within their system. They have quarterly meetings. They have resources for supportive members. They identify and share strategies with each other. And so they have a charter, you have to join it. They have pop-up meetings when they need them. They have social Twitter accounts. One of the things I really like about this particular model is that they have a lot of research available for you to look at to see what's going on in the world. And so that's UDLHE. It's a special interest group. The second one is, if you can go back to the slide, Pedagogy. This is one that is actually came out of Colorado, Denver, UC Denver. It's basically a Twitter community. They have occasional meetings, but it's a digital, they call it a digital campfire, where they meet. And I think I haven't used this one a lot. They have a Slack channel where you can go in and ask questions or chat with each other. They have a Twitter account so that you can see what's going on within their organization. And then they have email where you can email to the WordPress and ask questions and get responses. So it really is an open channel that they have available for people to just ask questions and get support and things like that. And as Jessica says in the chat, Pedagogy Slack is pretty active, so you can always be checking on what's going on there. The University of Maryland one is just similar to the UDHL one. It's an information sharing model. It's essentially a blog that you can check in and see what's going on with their blog and within their organization at any time. I'm not sure who writes all the blog posts. It looks like various members write it, but they've got some great posts there that you can look at and read and respond to. So that's another model that we looked at. And then the next one is a peer relationship. I really like this one, the EDUCAUSE one. They do peer reviewing and peer mentoring. So if you want to join that, you can sign up to be a peer or to be a mentor or to be a mentee. And then you meet regularly and set goals and work within those goals to improve your ID skills, your learning design skills. So it's more of a one-on-one type community of practice than a large group practice. And then the last one I think we have is the QM model, the design. And this is again, a professional opportunities. They offer webinars, they offer tweets, they have chats, they have monthly chats, they have a listserv. So it's a large organization of individuals who are like-minded in instructional design within the QM community. So those are all the different ones we've looked at. And if you know of others, feel free to let us know what other models you've seen, and because we're looking at all the models we can find to figure out what we want to do. And then so now we're going to move on to the next quick questions, and that, what do you guys think? We want to split or not?
We're right under, so we could stay in a big group. That might
be most efficient.
That might be, yeah, most efficient.
Okay, so the next one, key questions 3 and 4. Again, we want you to describe what are the most effective ways to structure a community of practice in terms of tools and organization. And you're going to want to do that one first. You want to do 4 or 2?
I think we could put them both.
They're
both on Padlet.
So yeah. So and then the 4th question is, what are the effective strategies for designing and motivating meaningful interactions in a community of practice? So just go back to the Padlet again and add your ideas. And we also have, oh, that's Amanda. Amanda noted that each model puts different levels of responsibility on the participants versus the organizers, which is true. The pedagogy is strictly participants, where some of the others are more organizational. I'm going to open up panels so I can see.
I mean, one thing to note on that, like the University of Maryland blog site, you'll get links to these resources to explore later as well. But one thing to note is that it looks like it started in 2016 and kind of petered out in 2017. It's a WordPress-based site, so there's like clearly, like there has to be a small group of people kind of in charge, right? To like initiate that messaging, and the interaction only comes through with like comments that people accessing the WordPress have. So like that seems to be a very like limited model of interaction, but it was also striking like how it fizzled out too, right? Versus the UDL HE special interest group is a group that I'm involved in, and it's had a life for, you know, several years as far as I'm aware, and there's still like a group of people who are involved with managing it, and but they kind of develop those quarterly meetings, and those involved in those quarterly meetings are put into like situations of like, here's a set of problems that we found through a survey of our group members, right? Like, so like that kind of involvement of group members determines what the topics will be. And then we're broken into like work groups, and we have access to different like sharing tools to, synchronously work together, like versus like the Slack channel used with Pedagogy. Seems like it's very participant driven, right? So like who manages that? It's not really top down. It seems like it's more, bottom up. It's like the whole group responsible for ensuring that continues and has a life.
Yeah, I think intentionality, just what I'm seeing here at this conference, and it's probably happening at every relatable conference around the country, is there probably will be a surge of these types of structures to solve immediate problems, to maybe extend relationships. Will they approach what would be a defined community of practice? We'll have to see, but I think intentionality about intermixing the sort of the best ways of bringing together people. It might be a consistent ongoing space, but setting up forums, live meetings at defined times where people can actually move from different modalities and contribute and catch up on what's been going on if they have not been participatory in the other verticals, we'll call that, or pathways.
So I don't see anybody on this Padlet yet, so I'm gonna drop that back in, or.
And I was thinking maybe we could just invite people to come off mic or off camera. Even if you've added stuff to Padlet, if there's like stuff you want to expand on, or if you have a really active community of practice within your organization that you would like to share more about, we would love to hear about, effective strategies that you've found or ideas that you are thinking about and want to implement and want feedback on.
Would it help if we shared out the Padlet on screen? Or do you want to? I mean, the questions are in now.
And I guess another question that I'm curious about, if you want to share in chat, is are there people present who have an active community of practice at their organization? And just feel free to like drop that into chat or come on mic. And if not, like, is this something that you're looking for in your organization?
We have one in the Padlet, provide multiple means of communication and interaction as well as modalities. I like that idea. That's for key question 3. Like we have a couple people adding stuff to the chat or to the Padlet. Thank you for that.
Yeah, some of the models we looked at provided opportunities for synchronous interaction. Some provide opportunities for asynchronous interactions. Some have very like directed prompts, while others are very kind of open-ended spaces for sharing. So curious about more like specific ideas that you've experienced in a community of practice or think would work well related to those kinds of types of interaction opportunities. And that just kind of comes to mind with that post about multiple means of communication, like in an ideal community of practice, particularly one built around learning design, would you want to have this kind of both and, right, opportunities to share formally, informally, synchronously, asynchronously. And if anyone is aware of specific tools we've mentioned, Slack and synchronous tools, certainly used Google Docs as well as social media channels for communities of practices. We're considering ourselves, we're considering the viability of teams for a community of practice. So any thoughts about particular tools and how those tools would accomplish particular purposes of a community practice, the upsides and downsides of management of those communities of practice. Feel free to, again, drop in Padlet in chat or open up your mic at this point. We're really just wanting to hear your thoughts about best practices in these the final section of this session.
Melissa, thank you for your comment in the chat.
Yeah, and that idea from Melissa's comment about monthly meetings where someone would organize the topic,
Yeah.
seeing that kind of might support Padlet comment that we have here about rotating facilitation leadership. I don't know if that's specifically something that happened in your library community of practice, Melissa, but I mean, that's one of the things I think of when I look at that, like blog-based community of practice as well. It's like, well, did the leadership kind of land squarely on the shoulders of a few key people who, you know, couldn't juggle that with everything else? And would it have had a longer lifespan if there had been some kind of rotation structure of leadership in that model?
I think that it's a point that leads to one of the other themes that we're seeing a lot, and that's this idea of self-care. And we're going to continually be asked to do more, and everyone's trying to figure out all these efficiencies and ways in which we can do more with less. So part of what we want to consider is not trying to add more, right? Have it be a space that's one of support, but not putting more on individuals who are probably, all of us at points will be asked to do more, finding ways to manage our cognitive load, but also giving to the community, but receiving back from it in a way that's beneficial for everything that we're faced with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the question Jess just put into chat aligns with our key question number 4, right? How do you ensure that it's meaningful interaction time within that community of practice, which, you know, felt like a limitation of the blog model as well.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to have a true, authentic exchange of ideas and build up that resource repository as a group, right? So how to nurture a community of practices without them feeling obligatory. In other words, they are truly authentically meaningful.
And I think that maybe also links back to key question 1 about how do learning designers best learn? So when we think about, for instance, like our online learners and having that kind of self-motivation to engage with material, that's a little bit of what we're referencing here too, like what sorts of opportunities motivate us to stay engaged and nurture communities of practice. I'm just kind of thinking about that and finding that interesting as well. And again, if anyone wants to share on video, things that they've found helpful or questions that they're thinking of as they are wanting to initiate these things, feel free to come on to video or unmute.
I think something that's kind of been on my mind, but not necessarily front and center until kind of going to my first face-to-face in a while, is this allowing, not just necessarily relying on tools that are technologies that just give us only the opportunities to connect and contribute and research and collaborate in the virtual space. I'm seeing a need to try to make use of other platforms. There was an item in the Padlet about marketing and feedback at conferences, and maybe establishing, riding on the coattails of conferences like this, when they get to if they get to a space where they're face to face, and you can kind of bring in what I feel is, even though I love my remote work, I really miss that that mental space in a face-to-face arena to be able to exchange ideas and kind of use all the senses as you're collaborating and building relationships and kind of looking at the landscape for our discipline, for our area.
I'm just gonna pull up the slide again. Sorry, I have to find the right slide. All right. Thank you for sharing all of the feedback that you've given us in the Padlet. Again, really our purpose here is to open up conversation. We are in the process of determining the best path forward for generating this sort of opportunity within our system. I know that there are, clearly there are a lot of different communities of practice out there already, some related specifically to the domain of learning design and some other related domains. But for us in our system, having various individual colleges that have different e-learning or learning design teams, we really see a need to develop something that is specifically for our system and for this consortial model of Colorado online app that we are moving toward. So hopefully, give it another year and we'll be able to come back and report some productive moves that we have made to build up this community. As we close out, we do want to share our contact information if anyone is interested in sharing any other thoughts that come to mind, or to reach out to find out more about the direction that we end up taking in our system. And let's see, Jess, if you have the link to the handout resource, if you could drop that in chat, that would be great. So Jess is going to drop in a link to a Google Doc. Please know that it's a view-only Google Doc, so if you do choose to use it to make some notes for yourself in the future, you will need to download a copy to use it as a note-taking device, as a worksheet, but also at the bottom of that handout, there are links to the various resources that we referenced and the models that we referenced in this session, as well as a link to the PDF version of these slides. And the link just appeared in chat. So do please feel free to grab that link to the Google Doc as a resource as you leave this session. And thank you again so much for attending. Is there any other final comment that Grace, Kathy, or Jeff you'd want to share?
In the back of my head, I was thinking about how we could, draw in
Oh, Grace, you went back on mute.
I was just thinking I need a way to reach out so we can see if there's others that might want to be sort of members of this initial foray, looking into what we might start the community college system community of practice with, just to kind of test out some of these ideas and have an incubator space to see what's working and what can be added. Might have to throw a form together if we didn't, or you can send email to any of us individually.
Yeah, so Francisco, at this point, the space that we are kind of noodling around with is Teams, and part of that is due to availability that all of our campuses, all of our colleges are moving toward a single tenant, and we'll all have easy access to Teams. We're kind of playing around with that space right now. Other social media like Slack and Twitter that you saw in some of the other models are, particularly viable for communities of practice, I think, that are not kind of system oriented, like within the community college system, like we are doing. Yeah, it looks like you're using Teams as well. And Yammer, I haven't heard of before. So thanks for that tip. We'll have to take a look at that. So I know that Jess, as our moderator, does need to close out our session. Jess, do you have a survey link that you need to share in the chat?
The surveys for this session and for all the sessions are on the ELK website. So that's a single survey after you've attended all of your sessions that you've wanted to attend that you'll fill out. So on day 2 or day 3, once you're finished with the conference.
Okay, perfect. So be sure to fill out your ELK session at the end of everything. But thank you again for attending our discussion today on communities of practice.